Rich customer said you smell like kitchen grease. I just bought his country club. What if the person who looked down on you for years, who humiliated you in front of others, became the reason you reclaimed your power? Hey, my name is Avi. I never thought I would be humiliated by a customer. But there I was, standing in the middle of the upscale restaurant's dining area, feeling the heat rise to my face as the words struck me. You smell like kitchen grease. I stood there, frozen, my heart pounding in my chest. The rich man who had spoken these words didn't even look up from his table, his voice dripping with condescension. He didn't seem to care that everyone around us had heard him. The silence that followed his comment felt like an eternity. I could feel the eyes of the other customers on me, judging, whispering, pitying. I could almost hear their thoughts, the whispers in their heads. Of course, she works here, she's just a waitress. The truth stung in a way I didn't expect. I had worked at this restaurant for years, working my way up, trying to prove that I could do something more with my life. But to him, I was just another invisible face behind the scenes, someone who existed to serve him and his kind. The grease, that clung to my skin from the kitchen, my livelihood. My hard work was nothing but a reason for him to degrade me. I wanted to cry, to run away and hide, but there was something in me, something that wouldn't let me break down in front of him. I could feel my hands shaking, but I didn't dare show any weakness. Instead, I forced a smile, tried to ignore the burning shame that threatened to consume me. Is there anything else, sir? I asked, my voice betraying none of the emotions roiling inside of me. He didn't respond, and I turned away, my legs barely able to carry me as I walked back to the kitchen. I heard his laughter behind me, cutting through the air like a knife. As I stood in the back of the restaurant, leaning against the cold steel counter, I felt a wave of self-loathing wash over me. Was this who I was? Was this how others saw me? I had spent years putting up with this kind of treatment, trying to convince myself that I was better than what my life had become. I had dreams, ambitions, but they felt so distant now, so impossible. I tried to shake it off, but the words echoed in my mind. You smell like kitchen grease. It wasn't just an insult, it was a reflection of everything I had come to believe about myself. I wasn't good enough. I wasn't worthy of more. And, yet, there was a flicker of something inside me, a voice that whispered, you don't have to stay here. You don't have to take this anymore. That was the moment. The moment I realized I had a choice. I could keep living the way I had been, stuck in this cycle of humiliation, or I could change my story. I didn't know how, or what it would look like, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep letting people like him define who I was. Will I choose to stay silent, or will I take control of my own story? The days that followed that moment were a blur. I tried to convince myself that it was just one rude customer, that I shouldn't let it bother me. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just about him. It was about everything I had silently endured. Small, slight, every condescending glance. Every moment where I was made to feel invisible. I had spent my life trying to prove myself. As a little girl, I had always been told that I wasn't good enough by my mother, by classmates, by people who were supposed to love me. No matter how hard I worked, no matter how many achievements I earned, it never seemed to be enough. I could feel the weight of their expectations bearing down on me, and no matter how much I tried to fight it, I was always falling short. Growing up in a modest home, I was taught that hard work would get me far. I believed it, too. I worked hard to get scholarships, to prove that I wasn't just the girl from the wrong side of town. But even then, the whispers followed me. At school, I was the poor kid. At work, I was just the waitress. People saw me for my job, for my appearance, for my class, but they never saw me for who I really was. Every compliment, every success, came with a catch, a reminder that I wasn't one of them. It wasn't just the comments from customers either. The subtle slights from my colleagues ate at me. I could hear the gossip as they talked about me behind my back, how I was the lowly server and not someone worthy of their time. It was the way my boss always looked at me, as if I was invisible, as if I didn't have anything to offer beyond the food I served. It was the way Sarah, my so-called friend, had slowly pulled away from me once she started hanging out with the upper crowd at work. She didn't have to say anything for me to feel it. The distance between us grew every time I spoke about my dreams. Every time I talked about my ambitions. She was going places, and I was still stuck. These weren't just small betrayals. These were the moments that chipped away at my self-esteem, and I had allowed them to. I allowed myself to believe that I was nothing more than the sum of these small, unnoticed hurts. But I had gotten so used to them, to being the person everyone walked over, that I didn't even know how to fight back. I just kept trying to make everyone else proud while quietly losing myself. It wasn't until that moment in the restaurant that everything came crashing down. That rich customer's words were the tipping point, but they weren't the cause. The cause was all those years of internalized doubt. The silent acceptance that I wasn't worthy of more. I could still hear the voices in my head. The echoes of those who told me I didn't belong. I thought about all the times I'd looked in the mirror and doubted myself when I'd convinced myself that maybe I was just meant to be this person. Maybe I wasn't meant to have more. Maybe I wasn't meant to be seen as anything more than the waitress who smelled like grease. But deep inside, something was shifting. That feeling, that voice that whispered I could do better, that I didn't have to live in the shadows of others' expectations, it hadn't gone away. It was growing stronger, louder, telling me that I was capable of more, of being more. The question that lingered in my mind was this: can I confront these hidden wounds, or will they remain buried forever? I stood in front of the mirror in my apartment that night, staring at my reflection. The weight of everything that had happened, all the years of feeling small, washed over me. The insult from the rich customer wasn't just the breaking point, it was the spark that finally ignited the fire within me. For too long, I had allowed myself to be defined by other people's opinions, by their expectations. But in that moment, something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to take it anymore. The pain, the humiliation, the endless betrayals. I had spent so much time letting those things shape me. But I realized that I didn't have to let them control my life. I was the one in charge now. If I didn't stand up for myself, who would? I could feel it deep within me, the shift. I had been running from the truth for years, hiding behind the comfort of my job, of the familiar routine. But now, I knew that I was capable of so much more. I could feel the pull of something bigger, something outside of the narrow world I had confined myself to. I had dreams, real ones, and it was time to stop pretending that they weren't possible. I wasn't just a waitress. I wasn't just a girl from the wrong side of town. I was Ava, and I was ready to take control of my life. But it wasn't going to be easy. I knew that. The path ahead was uncertain. What if I failed? What if I stumbled? What if I wasn't strong enough to fight back against a world that had always seen me as small and insignificant? I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and let the fear wash over me. I didn't know where this journey would take me, or how I would get there, but one thing was certain. I wasn't going to stay stuck. I wasn't going to let anyone define me anymore. I was ready to take control, ready to shape my own future, no matter how daunting it seemed. But where did I start? How did I make the leap from being the invisible girl working behind the scenes to the woman who could command attention, respect, and success? I thought about the rich customer, the one who had degraded me without a second thought. He was just one example of the world that I was determined to rise above. But what if there was more to it? What if this wasn't just about proving him wrong? What if I could take the power from his insult and turn it into something that would truly change my life? That's when the idea came to me. It wasn't just about escaping the world I was stuck in, it was about building a new one, a world where I was the one in control. I knew the country club he belonged to. I had overheard his snide remarks about it, how it was the epitome of wealth, power, and exclusivity. What if I could buy that very country club? What if I could turn the tables and take control of the world that had always looked down on me? I didn't know how I would do it. I didn't have the money, the connections, or the experience, but I had something better: determination, and I had a burning desire to prove to myself, to the world, and to him that I was more than just a girl who smelled like kitchen grease. I was capable of so much more. As I stood there, staring at my reflection, I made the decision. This is my story now. I was going to fight back. I was going to take control. And I was going to do whatever it took to make my dreams a reality. Can I find the courage to change my life, or will I hesitate when it matters most? It's one thing to have a moment of clarity, to feel the rush of adrenaline as you imagine changing your life. It's another thing entirely to actually take that first step. As soon as I made the decision, the weight of the task ahead settled on me. This wasn't going to be easy. In fact, it was going to be one of the hardest things I'd ever done. But I knew it had to be done. If I was going to prove to myself and to him that I was capable of more, I had to start planning. Buying a country club. The thought seemed so out of reach at first. I had no idea where to even begin. But I wasn't going to let that stop me. I had dreams, and I wasn't going to let my lack of resources hold me back. I would find a way. The first step was research. I needed to know everything about the country club. Its ownership, its financial standing, its members. I needed to understand the industry and learn the language of wealth and business. It wasn't enough to just want a tie, had to deserve it. I had to be able to walk into that world and command respect, not just demand it. I started spending every spare moment at the local library and online, reading about private clubs, real estate transactions, and the investment opportunities that were out there. Every night after my shift at the restaurant, I sat with my laptop, sketching out plans and researching financials. At first, it felt impossible, but the more I learned, the more I realized this wasn't just a wild fantasy, was a real possibility. I knew I couldn't do it alone. I needed help experts, people who knew how to navigate the world I was about to enter. So, I reached out. I contacted business brokers, real estate agents, and financial advisors who specialized in high-end properties. I was careful. I didn't let on that my goal was to buy a country club, not yet. I wanted to keep the plan close to my chest, so I could move in silence and surprise them all when the time was right. The more I learned, the more I saw the cracks in the system. This country club, despite its prestige, wasn't as untouchable as it appeared. Its members were wealthy, yes, but they weren't infallible. The club was struggling. Membership was down, and the upkeep costs were rising. The right investor could make a killing, and I intended to be that investor. I created a financial blueprint. Something that would prove I was serious. I started working with a lawyer to form an LLC that would shield my identity. I wanted to make my move carefully, without giving anyone a chance to sabotage my efforts. Every detail mattered now. Every connection, every dollar I could scrape together. The money would come from investors, and if necessary, a loan from a bank. I'd already begun establishing a reputation as a serious professional, thanks to my recent work in the hospitality industry. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get people to take me seriously. As the weeks passed, the pieces of the puzzle started to fall into place, but I couldn't help but feel the pressure mounting. I was trying to break into a world that had always excluded people like me. Every call I made, every meeting I arranged, felt like walking a tightrope. I couldn't afford to fall. I had to keep my focus and push forward no matter the obstacles that came my way. And then came the moment I'd been waiting for. I got the call. The country club was up for sale. I'd known it was coming, but now the deal was real, and it was mine, for the taking, but it wasn't going to be easy. I would have to fight tooth and nail for it. There would be negotiations, there would be competitors, and there would be people trying to stop me. But I was ready. I had a plan. I had the knowledge. And most importantly, I had the will. I was going to take control of this. I was going to show him and everyone else just how much more I was capable of. The question that kept me awake at night was this: will I feel victorious when it's over? Or will the consequences leave me feeling empty? The day had arrived. The paperwork was signed. The negotiations had been long and tense. But now, I was holding the keys to the country club in my hand. I was a step away from something I never thought would be possible. Something that had started as a way to prove myself, to take back the control I'd lost, was now real. But the journey didn't end with the purchase. No, it had only just begun. The hard part was yet to come. The first thing I did when I officially owned the country club was walk through the front doors. I had made my entrance carefully. I wanted to take my time, to savor the victory that had been years in the making. But as I crossed the marble floors, I could feel the eyes on me. I could sense the skepticism, the judgment, and I knew it wasn't just from the staff. The members, those privileged few who had once looked down on me, would be here soon. But I wasn't afraid. I was calm, collected, a woman who knew what she was doing. As I stood in the main hall, the opulence of the place surrounding me, I realized something. This wasn't just about revenge. It wasn't about showing him or anyone else how wrong they were. This was about me, my own journey, my own transformation. I wanted them to see me differently. I wanted them to look at me with respect. But more than that, I wanted to feel respected. I had spent too much of my life trying to earn the approval of others. But now, it was time for me to take control of my own narrative. I had a meeting scheduled with the club's board of directors. These were the people who held the power, who ran the show. And I knew that how they reacted to me would determine how smoothly the transition would go. I could feel the weight of their judgment before I even walked into the room. But I didn't let it shake me. When I walked into the conference room, the tension was palpable. The board members, a mix of older, wealthy individuals, all looked at me with varying degrees of curiosity and disdain. I was the new owner, and they all knew what that meant. They saw me as an outsider. Someone who didn't belong in their world. Someone who, just months ago, was nothing more than a waitress, who smelled like kitchen grease. I took a seat at the head of the table, and the conversation began. They were polite, but I could feel their dismissiveness in the way they addressed me. It was clear they weren't taking me seriously. One of them, an older man in a perfectly tailored suit, made a subtle remark about my experience, questioning whether I truly understood the intricacies of running a place like this. It was a thinly veiled jab at my background, my lack of pedigree. I didn't flinch. Instead, I smiled. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental. I had learned over the years how to navigate situations like this. How to stand tall. How to fight back when no one expected it. And I wasn't about to back down now. I may not have the title you think I should, I said, my voice steady, but I know this club. I've been here, serving you, for years. I understand what it means to work hard for success, and I'm ready to take this place to the next level. The words hung in the air, and for a moment, there was silence. But it wasn't the silence of skepticism anymore. It was the silence of respect, just a crack in the armor they had built around themselves. The conversation continued, and I didn't let up. I laid out my plans for the club, for its future, for how I would make it thrive in ways they hadn't even considered. I wasn't just the new owner anymore. I was someone who had a vision, someone who had fought for this moment, and someone who was going to make sure it worked. The meeting ended with them acknowledging my position, albeit reluctantly. But the message had been sent. I wasn't just here to play their game, I was here to change it. As I left the meeting room, I couldn't help but smile. This wasn't the feeling of victory I had imagined. It wasn't the satisfaction of seeing them squirm. It was something deeper. It was the satisfaction of knowing that I had taken control of my own story. I had built this from the ground up, and I was standing in my power, no longer afraid of what others thought of me. But there was still one thing that lingered in my mind. The rich customer, the one who had started all of this with his degrading words. I knew he'd be around, and I knew I'd have to face him eventually. The question that kept nagging at me was this: will I feel relieved after this, or will it leave me questioning everything? I spent the following days walking through the grand hallways of the country club, absorbing everything that had changed and everything that hadn't. I had achieved what I set out to do. I had bought the club, and I had taken control. But the satisfaction I thought I would feel, the sense of triumph I expected to wash over me, was strangely absent. It wasn't that I wasn't proud of what I had accomplished, it was the opposite. I had poured everything into this plan, and now that it was real, I couldn't help but feel a hollowness inside. I had fought so hard to prove to myself and to the world that I was capable of more, that I had built something to finally be seen as worthy. But now that I had it, I wasn't sure if it was worth the cost. The constant pressure, the endless negotiation, the weight of proving myself to everyone around MIT, had all come at the expense of something I hadn't even realized I had lost. I had been so focused on showing the world who I was, on making sure that no one could ever look at me the same way again, that I hadn't stopped to ask myself, what is it that I really want? In the midst of all the excitement and power, I couldn't ignore the quiet moments of doubt. What if I had done this all for the wrong reasons? What if I had been so determined to take control, to stand up against the people who had belittled me, that I lost sight of why I started this journey in the first place? I thought about the rich customer, the one who had mocked me in the restaurant, whose words had set everything in motion. I had imagined, countless times, how I would confront him, how I would stand before him as the new owner of the country club, showing him just how far I had come. But now that I was standing here, in this place, with all the success and power I had dreamed of, I realized something. It wasn't about him. It wasn't about showing him that I was better than he thought. It was about showing myself that I was capable of so much more than I had ever believed. And yet, here I was, with all of this power. And I still wasn't sure how to feel. I sat at my desk in the office, overlooking the sprawling golf course, the sun beginning to set over the horizon. The world outside seemed so still, so peaceful, and yet, I was a storm of conflicting emotions. I had achieved everything I thought I wanted, and yet I wasn't sure it had brought me the peace I sought. The more I reflected, the more I realized that all I had done was trade one set of expectations for another. I had fought to climb the ladder, to prove that I belonged, but I was starting to see that true power didn't come from what others thought of me. It didn't come from the country club, or the wealth that came with it. It came from within. I wasn't sure what my next step was. I didn't know if owning this place would bring me the peace I craved. But one thing was clear. It wasn't the club that was going to heal me. It was me, my own ability to accept myself, to embrace my worth without needing anyone else's validation. I had to stop chasing their approval. I had to stop letting my worth be defined by the opinions of others. I had to find the courage to move forward, not as someone trying to prove something, but as someone who was already enough. Had my victory brought me peace? Not yet, but I knew that the real journey wasn't about what I could accomplish. It was about learning to accept who I was, flaws and all, and to stop seeking validation from people who didn't see me for what I truly was. I didn't know what the future held. But I knew one thing: I was done being defined by the expectations of others. I was ready to move forward, to build a life that was mine, free from the burdens of the past. The question that had haunted me for so long finally found its answer. Has revenge really brought me peace, or is there more healing to be done? And the answer was clear. There was more. There was always more. I had taken control of my story, but now it was time to rewrite it.